right, let's talk about distractions. Have you ever had, can we do that again? Because that was too funny.
Distractions, there you go.
All right, let's talk about distractions. Sometimes they are good, most times they are bad. Have you ever had like a project that you're working on or something that's taking a long time and you are like, okay, I can't think about this anymore. I need a distraction. In that sense, it's good. It's a brain break, right? And other times you maybe procrastinated and the project or the thing is due by this certain time and you now are 2 hours before that deadline and you haven't even gotten started yet. And you go, oh, I just need a brain break. Yeah, that is not the time for a brain break. You've got work to do. And that distraction that you want to bring in would not be a healthy distraction at this point in time. I think as Christians, we have things that can become distractions for us that will keep us from either doing the will of God in our life or believing for God to do the things that he's promised that he would do in our lives. And so I was on the phone with a friend of mine recently, and she sent me this text and she's like, can we get on the phone? Can we talk? And this is like a long distance prayer partner. So I was like, you know what? Yeah, let's, when you send that message, this is like an indicator for me of something is necessary. So we got on the phone, we're talking, I'm listening to her, and she's kind of sharing some frustration that she's feeling and disappointment that she's feeling. And she's questioning, did I hear the Lord correctly? I thought that this is what he was saying. Maybe he wasn't saying this. Maybe I'm not supposed to do this, but I don't know. I don't understand. And I realize as I'm listening to her, she's not hung up on whether or not she heard God correctly. I think there's a confidence there. What's tripping her up now is the fact that it has not happened in the timing that she expected it to happen. So the distraction for her of the timing not being fulfilled is now causing her to doubt what was actually spoken. And this is not the only time that we see this. We see this in many aspects of our life, but we also see this in the Word of God. So I want us to take a look at a place where there was a potential distraction that could have derailed so much. So let's look at the story of David and Goliath. This is a story that probably many of us are very familiar with. This is a story that's like talked about in secular circles, right? Like the David versus Goliath scenario with like a football team or whatever. Like this is something that's referenced even outside of Christian circles. But there's a distraction that almost took everything out in the story. So we're looking at 1 Samuel chapter 17. I'm going to summarize most of this because I don't want us to just have 20 minutes of sitting here reading the Bible, although that is not a bad idea. But what we have here is Goliath, the uncircumcised Philistine, which is like an insult of biblical proportions, who has come against the army of the Lord. And then you have David, little old David, shepherd boy, who's been out doing his thing with the sheep. This is like the same David that becomes King David, that writes most of the Psalms, that is like the king in the lineage of Jesus. Okay, so this is right now shepherd boy David, not King David yet. And his father, Jesse, sends him to the Israelite army camp where his brothers are, sends him with food. So he's supposed to be bringing them food, bringing them sustenance. He shows up and he sees Goliath taunting the Israelite army, taunting the people of God, and saying that nobody's brave enough to come out and fight him and all of this stuff. And he's kind of got a point because the rest of the camp is shivering in their boots, so to speak. They're not really going out and boldly facing Goliath or doing anything about this. And so David starts asking some questions. So we see in verse 26, David asked the soldiers standing nearby, "What will a man get for killing this Philistine and ending his defiance of Israel? Who is this pagan Philistine anyway that he is allowed to defy the armies of the living God?" This is the perspective David is coming with. Now we should know something about David. His relationship with the Lord had been forged in the fields. So while he is a shepherd boy, he's out there. That's where we think many of the Psalms were written. That's where he's just really having his conversations with the Lord. He has spent so much of his life alone with God in the fields. And so this strength and faith in who God is, that is deeply rooted in David's heart. And so when he sees Goliath defying God and mocking him, he is offended on God's behalf. There's like a righteous anger that is rising up in him. And he says this, who's this pagan Philistine anyway, that he's allowed to defy the armies of the living God? And these men gave David the same reply. They said, yes, that is the reward for killing him. So the reward had been previously discussed that you would get. There's a financial benefit and there's a wife benefit that comes along with this. So then we get to verse 28. Here comes our distraction. But when David's oldest brother, Eliab, heard David talking to the men, he was angry. What are you doing around here anyway? He demanded. What about those few sheep you're supposed to be taking care of? I know about your pride and your deceit. You just want to see the battle. So he accuses David of showing up. Now, remember, David's father sent him, but his brother accuses him of showing up because he just wants to be like in the know. He's got to be around the action because he's bored of his little sheep life that he has out there. So he's very insulting to David in this. And then David responds, what have I done now? I was only asking a question. Verse 30, he walked over to some others and asked them the same thing and received the same answer. Then David's question was reported to King Saul, and the king sent for him. Okay, go back to this, what the brother says. He says, what are you doing around here anyway? What about those few sheep, which is an insult right there, that you are supposed to be taking care of? I know about your pride and your deceit. You just want to see the battle. How many times has somebody mouthed off to you and you have not held your tongue? You have wanted to unleash. A long time ago, I was a teacher, a middle school teacher. And those children were the best and the worst thing in the whole entire world, depending on the day. I had so much fun teaching, and I taught music. And so we were able to be creative together. It was awesome. I loved it. I loved being in the classroom. But every once in a while, one of these kids, at the age they are, trying to kind of discover their limits, their boundaries, come into their own a little bit, would mouth off. And I had to remember, you are the adult in the room, and you do not go toe-to-toe with this child and their attitude, even though I could. So when we look at this situation with David, he had every opportunity to pop off on his brother, to defend himself, to go absolutely off with his brother. But what does it say he does? He doesn't say anything. He just said, he responds quickly, what have I done? I was just asking a question. And then it says he walks away. He walked over to some others. He asked them the same thing. And then eventually the question that he's asking gets to King Saul. And King Saul asks for David to come in and speak with him. The brother's response was a distraction, and David could have locked in on that distraction, fought that off, and missed his opportunity. But instead, he walks away and eventually finds himself in the presence of the king, and is in the presence of King Saul, where he'd be fitted with armor that he ends up stripping off because it isn't his. But that's where he gets the opportunity to take out Goliath. And if he doesn't have the opportunity to take out Goliath, he's not put on the king's radar. He doesn't find his way to the palace. He doesn't build all those, get to the point where he is King David that we know now. If he had taken on this distraction. So I wonder for us, those distractions that come up in your life that cause you to question, cause you to doubt, those things that you could employ. What happens when you just walk away from that and pursue the opportunity that God places in front of you?